Just how concerned should you be about Tony Pollard and Rhamondre Stevenson for the rest of the season? All that and more this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, it's a very somber episode of Locked On Dynasty after what the 49ers did to my Cowboys last night. But let's talk about Tony Pollard, who, basically was a zero in this game. 8 carries for 29 yards. Did save you a little bit in the passing game. 4 receptions for 35 yards. Back-to-back weeks where Tony Pollard's been held under 50 rushing yards. How concerned are you about Tony Pollard moving forward?
I'm going to be honest, Marcus, I'm probably not as nervous as you are, right? I still think this is the same Tony Pollard. I think this offense looks very much anemic, right? Like, this is not the Cowboys offense that I think anybody, analyst, fanalist, fan, it doesn't matter. Nobody projected the offense to look like this. Now, statistically, yes, Tony Pollard is giving us some things to be concerned about, right? Averaging a career low 4.2 yards per carry, career low at 2.7 yards after contact per attempt. It's just not been nearly as explosive as you're used to seeing. 7% missed forced tackle rate. He's never had a season below 20% missed forced tackle rate. So, there are a lot of anomalies to Tony Pollard's play that tells us, I don't think that this is necessarily representative of who he is as a running back. And I think a big part of this concern is, going back to, this Dallas Cowboys struggles on offense. And you can speak to a lot about that. So I want to get your thoughts. I think that Tony Pollard is still very explosive, has workhorse potential, but it's really hard for that to, I think, amount to much when you don't see that explosivity that I think we were projecting for this offense.
Now, if you were taking the optimistic view here, is it that in 3 of the last 4 games, they played the Jets, the Patriots, and the 49ers? Those are all 3 really good defenses that are really stout up front, right? So I can understand a little bit why he's not having these long, explosive runs. But to me, he just doesn't look anywhere near as healthy as he did last year. The big plays are completely gone. There's just not the same type of twitch and juice that we saw last year. And remember, he's coming off a pretty serious foot injury. So that could be, part of this as well. They've also had, a lot of changes on the offensive line. I'm just looking at the situation where he's looked fine. He's gotten a lot of touches. But I think the best thing for his long-term dynasty value is for him to stay in Dallas, right? Because the Cowboys are going to give him that work. I just don't know. I don't think there's been nothing from him this year to suggest that the Cowboys are going to give him a long-term deal. And if that's not the case, then I wouldn't be shocked if we see his dynasty value just absolutely tank by this time next year.
And then I'll probably be buying at that point. Now, question from you, the resident Cowboys expert here. How much of this do you think is in part due to the fact that you've got Mike McCarthy calling plays? Does that, if you heard that they were going to be bringing in somebody else, say Tony Pollard's staying in Dallas, right? Let's pretend for a moment that it actually comes to fruition. It happens 2025, 2024, we've got Tony Pollard in Dallas, right? If I told you that Mike McCarthy would not be the one calling plays, would that change how you feel at all about his long-term outlook?
Maybe a little bit, but it hasn't been because of a lack of usage. Like the Cowboys are trying to get him the ball. There just hasn't been any type of big runs. And even in the big runs that he had, I think he had one nice run against the 49ers. It's just, it wasn't to the house like we saw him the last couple of years. And this happens. The running backs, once they start to age a little bit, once they start to have some injuries pile up on their body, I don't know. He's obviously, I'm not going out and trying to sell him, but you are talking about somebody who is being drafted as RB7, at least going into the month of October. There's quite a few running backs that are being drafted behind him right now that I think I would sell him for. I'll give you an example, Kate. I would much rather have Kenneth Walker, who is RB13, than Tony Pollard going forward right now.
I think that's probably fair. Just given age, given if you want some fresher legs, obviously you have the concern that maybe we see Zach Charbonnet continue to get involved there. I think that one's a pretty tough call, but I also think, Marcus, that it's hard to panic about Tony Pollard right now. You mentioned the difficult defenses, right? The 49ers, the Patriots, even the Cardinals. I'm going to give them a little bit more credit, in comparison to what we probably expected from the Cardinals this season defensively. I think those are all like pretty solid defenses. Now on the flip side of that, you've got the Eagles within the division. You've got the Commanders, who haven't looked great, but also I think when they're playing up to their full strength, a pretty talented defense. I just think that there's still time for him to bounce back, and I'm willing to say that maybe the lack of explosive plays might be in part to some of these tougher defensive matchups. And that,
well, they play the Chargers next week on Monday Night Football. The Chargers,
that'll be a
cannot
great
stop
test.
If it's just another one of these games where it's 17 carries for 68 yards, couple catches, the thing is he's getting goal line work. It's just it hasn't really translated to touchdowns. I think now is the time that I'm considering trading Tony Pollard, because I think I could see a situation where this just gets a lot worse before it gets better. Really quickly, the rest of the offense, I mean, you're right. This Cowboys offense is struggling. CeeDee Lamb held under 55 yards in the last 3 games. Brandon Cooks, the Cowboys' big acquisition this offseason, 77 total yards through 5 games. Dak Prescott playing some of the worst football of his career. This is an offense that we thought was going to be elite, and it's been anything but so far.
And the interesting thing about Dak Prescott, though, like I think the big narrative coming into 2023 was he's got to clean up the turnovers. But cleaning up those turnovers, Marcus, I think has been at a huge detriment to the rest of this offense.
That's what I was worried about, that Dak would hear all this stuff about him turning the ball over and turn into a non-aggressive quarterback. And you're seeing it now. His ADOT is one of the worst in the league. They're not pushing the ball down the field. He's getting rid of the ball really quickly. And then now teams have adjusted to it, and you saw the San Francisco 49ers jump a bunch of underneath routes because they know he's not challenging them deep.
Yeah, Dak Prescott, 56.5% of passes short of the sticks. That's the the 5th highest rate among quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Specifically, the 3rd among starting quarterbacks right now. You don't love to see that usage, because obviously, you are so worried about protecting the ball that you sacrifice some of those that willingness to play deep. It gives defenses less field that they need to cover. They know you're not going deep that often. They can play up closer to the sticks because they know you're not going to throw beyond it. Like that, it becomes this sort of circular catch-22 of, okay, so you're protecting the ball, but you're giving up all these explosive plays. You're also limiting the upside of any plays you do complete, because defenders know exactly where you're going with the ball, and they know that they've got just a few yards beyond the line of scrimmage that they need to be covering here. So all of that, I think, is playing into some of these struggles for Tony Pollard too. And like, even talking about, when you're throwing short of the sticks on the majority of your plays, that hurts the run game too. Because again, like even if you're calling a run, like it doesn't matter, right? Because whether you're calling a run, whether you're calling a pass, they only have to play up to the line. Like
it's not great right now,
no.
Kate. It's a really bleak situation in Dallas. It's also a really bleak situation in New England right now, especially for Rhamondre Stevenson, who we will talk about next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I actually just placed a futures bet this morning on the Steelers to make the playoffs at plus 125 on FanDuel. So you can make those kind of bets out there if you want to. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. This episode is brought to you by Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Host Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchups, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and so much more. Plus, get in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Okay, let's talk about Rhamondre Stevenson, who was one of the running backs we really liked going into this year. We thought he was going to get a bunch of work. That has not been the case. 8 carries for 24 yards against the Saints, 0 receptions in this game. How concerned are you about Rhamondre Stevenson, who was being drafted as RB11 in October?
I'm pretty dang concerned. So looking at, what we saw with Rhamondre Stevenson or Tony Pollard here, I mentioned I'm not ready to go all out here, but the reason I'm so concerned about Rhamondre Stevenson is that really he's generally being outplayed by Ezekiel Elliott, which is really
bad.
kind of concerning for me. If you told me heading into this season, Rhamondre Stevenson is going to have 53% of these rush attempts through the first 5 games of the season, I would tell you, great. Rhamondre Stevenson is going to be an RB1. 13% missed forced tackle rate. Don't love that. Averaging just 2.8 yards per carry, 1.8 yards after contact per attempt. Now, much like the Dallas Cowboys, I do think that some of the Patriots' struggles on offense are contributing to that. But you don't love the fact that Ezekiel Elliott looks like the better running back out there. Lower stuff percentage rate, gaining more yards after contact, more efficient, just generally speaking, so far this season. And if you would have told me that coming out, just before, when we first got that news of the signing, I would have told you were off your rocker. Now, not necessarily like you weren't drafting Rhamondre Stevenson, I think, all for his rushing ability. You mentioned it at the top, that receiving work was kind of integral to the upside there for fantasy. We had seen Rhamondre Stevenson get a ton of work. Right now ranks 4th on the team in terms of routes run, but just not seeing the target share that I think you would have expected.
6 catches in the last 4 games.
Not great.
Those are Derrick Henry numbers. Actually, Derrick Henry is doing more in the passing game, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But he's been completely zapped in that part of the game. And if he's not getting receptions and he's not getting the rushing touchdowns, because that's what they bring in Ezekiel Elliott, what is Rhamondre Stevenson?
He's not a top 15 dynasty running back. That's for sure.
I mean, and he's somebody that in redraft leagues is a borderline droppable player. Like, honestly, like what is he doing right now for you that you have any faith with him going forward? Because you look at their schedule, it's brutal. Like, how many of these matchups are going to be favorable for New England going forward?
Um, yeah, that's tough. And this offense is playing like garbage. It's not like they have a ton of time to establish the run, right? Because I don't know what's going on with this Patriots defense. Obviously, they're facing some pretty stiff competition, so maybe that's to account for some of their struggles defensively. Is just that like they are outmatched in terms of talent. But Rhamondre Stevenson opened up the year with 2 top 20 performances. It's just been the last 2 weeks, man. Or 3 weeks, sorry, that he's really struggled. I'm not ready to drop him in redraft just yet, but the fact that he's ranking 7th in team target share here, despite the fact that, I mean, this is an offense without many weapons, right? You've got Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster, who has looked terrible, Devontae Parker, Demario Douglas, like he should be he should be at the top. This isn't a guy that, necessarily had a great athletic profile coming out.
No,
He was actually
no,
like pretty poo there. 40-yard dash, ran a 4.64. These weren't official combine times. They were from his pro day, but he's kind of that bigger bruiser back, and if he's not going to be able to establish that run, he doesn't have the athleticism to generate it on its own. So I'm really concerned, and I have to worry that this team is just going into full rebuild mode. It doesn't
which
seem.
which makes me wonder, Kate, could Rhamondre potentially be traded this year? Because he's going into this is year 3 for him. He'd be going into a contract year in year 4. The Patriots aren't going to contend this year. They probably need to try to build back up some of their draft capital. If a team is like Cleveland, right, and they're 3-3 at the trade deadline, and they could trade a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick for Rhamondre Stevenson, he would be a massive upgrade over Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt. I could see 3 or 4 teams being like, "Hey, Rhamondre, let's rent him for a year and a half. You'd be an upgrade over what we have at running back right now."
No, so let's say in this hypothetical universe, he is traded, right? How many offenses in the league right now could he be traded to where that would be considered a plus move for dynasty managers? I think the Cleveland Browns would probably be one of them.
I think Baltimore
Um,
would be a good spot for him.
Baltimore feels like a great spot.
I
There's not a ton of places
No,
where you think.
but we do know this is what happens to the running back position. It's gonna get more decimated over the next, few weeks. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you at least start to hear trade rumors. And honestly, if you're a Rhamondre Stevenson dynasty owner, you're probably hoping that's the case right now because it's just not clicking in New England.
Yeah, and I just don't think with the current trajectory of this
No,
team that it's going to look much better. It's just the usage is concerning me, the lack of efficiency is concerning me. But mostly I think, partially that environment of being in the Patriots offense that's struggling with
sure.
turnovers and struggling to move the ball. That doesn't help, but also he's not helping his
Yeah,
offense move the ball. So it's once again, I think maybe in a different circumstance, I might feel a little bit better if you were on a team like the Browns, and maybe he will be soon enough. But I do think that until we see something different, we're probably going to be needing to
yep,
rest him on our benches for
yes.
the time being.
All right, let's talk about one more disappointing AFC running back next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It is so easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs. All you have to do is add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Kate, let's talk about the old big dog, Derrick Henry, who's given us several seasons of outstanding production. What are your thoughts after 5 games?
I'm a little worried about the efficiency, Marcus, to be totally transparent. Now, I don't think, I think like people have been kind of hanging their you know, hopes or questions on rookie Tajay Spears, who's to this point looked pretty incredible. But I do think that what we're seeing so far from Derrick Henry, I think he's still going to lead this backfield in touches by far to close out the NFL season. But looking at the efficiency metrics for Derrick Henry versus Tajay Spears this year is kind of concerning, right? You have Derrick Henry averaging 3.1 yards per attempt to Spears's 5.8, 19 missed forced tackle rate compared to Tajay Spears 30%. 0.7 yards before contact per attempt to Spears's 1.4. Like all of these are indicating to me that Derrick Henry is losing a little bit of juice. Just it's sad to see. And
It's
again,
definitely happened. There's no doubt. There's
yeah,
no doubt. It's just, can he still be effective? Which, to be fair to Derrick Henry, there's been some months like earlier in his career where September and October just kind of aren't his months. But once he gets into November and December, that's when he starts to really become efficient. I just have a harder time believing it at his age now that that's going to happen.
yeah, age 29. I think that again, he's going to lead the team in touches. That's not a question. But the question is more or less like, is this a time that you take what you can get for Derrick Henry in terms of his dynasty value? Because I do think we have seen the drop off for these veteran running backs. It is precipitous. It is fast. It is sharp, and they lose value incredibly quickly once the narrative is fully caught up that this guy might be done. This might be his I don't want to call it his last season, but
So
this might be his time to
uh,
go.
a couple trades on Dynasty League football. Derrick Henry for a 2023 second round pick. I'm going to assume that's probably a late second round pick. It's probably a team that's trying to contend, right? And they're probably pretty good. They probably just wanted to load up. Would you do that trade?
I probably would. You know why, Marcus? Because even if they're trying to contend, I'm not sure Derrick Henry is going to help them get there.
Derrick Henry for Quentin Johnson. This was yesterday.
Ooh, I'll take Quentin Johnston.
Yep, so would I. I mean, you're getting a lot of Derrick Henry for Javonte Williams.
I'll take Javonte Williams.
I don't know. That one's Derrick. Okay, here's another one from yesterday.
Prior to this knee injury, Javonte Williams was the top 5 running back. Has he not regained any value from the fact that he's returned from this catastrophic knee injury? I know like he hasn't looked like Javonte Williams just yet, but
I think it's that this Jaleel McLaughlin looks good. Like that's the part that's kind of weird. It feels like Denver would like to have a committee there, but that's besides the point. One more. Derrick Henry for a 3rd and a 4th round pick. See, that's where to me, I'm probably like, you know what? I'll just, assuming I'm somewhat contending, I'll probably just ride with Derrick Henry.
yeah, I think that's a very fair line to draw. But again, I can, to unload some of these assets before the drop off gets even sharper, which
Sure.
I think that is very much within the realm of possibility based on what we're seeing so far. I mean, Tajay Spears, though he hasn't necessarily had a ton of touches, he's had at least 8 touches in the past 4 weeks. Played over 50% of offensive snaps in 4 out of 5 weeks this season. I think it's just we're starting to see the signs of decline that
Yeah.
I think we were all very fearful of. And if we didn't have a running back right next to him that didn't look better in the same matchups, I wouldn't be so concerned. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just worry that this might be the near end for Derrick Henry in terms of efficiency for fantasy. And guess what? Now that I've said that, he's probably going to explode for
Let's hope so.
200 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I sure do hope so. Yeah, that
I
would be
hope so.
great. Just what I've seen so far, it has me concerned.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, you get Matt and Ryan back on Tuesday, Wednesday. Kate, you and I Thursday, Friday, talking some rookies on Thursday, and then promotion commotion on Friday, one of our favorite segments of the week. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out our shows on YouTube. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.